Welcome to The Explainer. If you look at Los Angeles right now, the civic backdrop is basically chaotic. Just recently, we've seen these incredibly boisterous anti-ICE protests where tension just reached a boiling point. We're talking reports of a protester biting an ICE agent and others actively threatening the lives and families of officers. Against this highly charged atmosphere, the 2026 mayoral race is heating up in a way literally no one predicted. Today, our goal is to impartially unpack this incredibly complex race. We're going to look strictly at the data, the financial audits, and the highly polarized rhetoric defining this election, specifically focusing on a surging outsider who is aggressively challenging the establishment.
Okay, let's dive into this roadmap. We'll be looking at the unlikely contender, the economics of homelessness, allegations of criminal negligence, transparency and tax dollars, public safety and policing, and finally, faith in the campaign. Section 1. The unlikely contender, Spencer Pratt's political surge. Let's start with the first major data point of this explainer. The political establishment in Los Angeles is being shaken up by a name you might actually recognize from early 2000s reality television, Spencer Pratt. And here is why his platform demands serious, objective analysis. Back in February, CNN noted Pratt had just a 7% chance in the mayoral race. But today, that number has rocketed up to 27%. He's surged to over a quarter of the projected vote. So for anyone dismissing his campaign early on, well, they're now facing the reality that he has a legitimate shot at winning this whole thing. So what exactly is driving this surge? Section 2, the economics of homelessness, the $418 million budget. And this brilliantly illustrates the absolute crux of the debate in Los Angeles right now, this staggering financial data surrounding the city's streets. Because the debate isn't just about what we see, it's really about what's being spent. Let's look at the numbers directly from the city's chief auditor. The city spends an astounding $418 million per year on homelessness. But the financial watchdog report shows that out of that massive budget, only 10% actually goes toward getting people permanently off the streets. Let that sink in for a second. 90% of a nearly $500 million annual budget is caught up in other program spending. Naturally, this is prompting some massive questions about efficiency and potential fraud. Current Mayor Karen Bass was confronted with these exact numbers and asked why she was missing her stated 2026 goal to end street homelessness. Her explanation was pretty revealing. She stated, and I quote, "I found a lot of people who worked internally in the system who were very resistant to ending street homelessness." She's pointing to a bureaucratic blockade within her own city's infrastructure as the primary hurdle. Now, what's really interesting here is the stark contrast in narratives. On one hand, you have Mayor Bass's view, which blames bureaucratic, internal system resistance. But right across from it, you have Spencer Pratt's aggressive counter-narrative. Pratt outright rejects the bureaucratic excuse. He claims the system is a mafia-like organization and an NGO scam designed to steal tax money while intentionally keeping people on the streets. Section 3. Allegations of criminal negligence. Pratt's explosive counterclaims. This brings us to the incredibly explosive rhetoric defining the race right now. Following the news that California Governor Gavin Newsom formally endorsed Mayor Bass for re-election, Pratt launched a series of severe, graphic allegations against both politicians. Let's look at his exact words. Reacting to the endorsement, Pratt alleged that Newsom and Bass are covering for each other because they're complicit in laundering, $24 billion to actually increase homelessness? Now, obviously, these are massive, unverified allegations, but we're unpacking them because this exact rhetoric is exactly what's fueling his 27% surge in the polls. And the accusations get much more specific and honestly pretty graphic. Pratt alleges that Bass and Newsom are guilty of criminal negligence related to encampment fires in the Palisades, claiming they let 12 people burn alive. He points to an increase in what he calls naked drug addict zombies in front of playgrounds, schools, and coffee shops. He's also raised these deeply alarming claims about extreme animal cruelty, stating that people are injecting drugs into dogs on Skid Row, lighting them on fire, and breeding them to death while the city's no-kill shelters fail due to underfunding. Section 4, transparency in taxpayer dollars, radical financial accountability. Shifting gears away from those shocking allegations, let's examine the functional solutions Pratt is actually proposing. Because, it's one thing to point out the problems, but what's the plan? For Pratt, it centers entirely around radical financial accountability. So how does he plan to achieve this? Here is his 3-step transparency plan. Step 1, get rid of the confusing .gov dashboards that he says practically require you to be a forensic investigator to understand. Step 2, Implement full, simple tax tracking for every single department, not just homelessness, but police, fire, transportation, all of it. And step 3, make it so simple that high schoolers can log on and audit exactly where their parents' tax money is going. I absolutely love this specific example he gives because it really grounds his policy in everyday life. He imagines a scenario where a high school kid logs into the city ledger and says, wait, that much money for this refrigerator at the fire station? That exact same refrigerator at Costco is a third of that price. Pratt essentially wants an army of everyday citizens effortlessly holding the city accountable for overpriced items and wasteful spending.
Section 5. Public Safety and Policing, a campaign focused on mothers. Moving beyond the budget, we have to look at who is actually voting for this platform. If you ask Spencer Pratt why he's suddenly a serious political contender, he points to one specific demographic: mothers.
Pratt's assessment of the current safety dynamics in LA is stark. According to him, under the current system, the only people who are safe are drug dealers and the city-funded, quote, needle givers and meth pipe givers. In total contrast, he argues that mothers and children are left entirely unprotected, literally unable to use public parks or walk to school safely due to illegal encampments.
To fix this, Pratt outlines a zero-tolerance law enforcement strategy. He says he isn't trying to invent new rules. He simply wants to strictly enforce the existing laws that are already on the books. This means immediately clearing encampments near schools and parks. And he's drawing a hard line in the sand here, stating that if the current LAPD chief refuses to enforce the law, he'll simply get a new chief and replace any officers who won't do the job, all with the stated goal of making Los Angeles the safest city in the country.
Section 6. Faith in the campaign. A divine mission. Let's move to our final section. To fully understand this chaotic run for office, you kind of have to understand the personal motivation behind it. And for Spencer Pratt, this campaign is fundamentally driven by his marriage and his personal faith. Pratt views his political opposition through this highly spiritual, almost biblical lens. Speaking about his recent debate experiences, he literally stated, "I've never argued with two lying demons live on TV in a political setting." That really highlights his highly charged, literal view of his political opponents. He went on to say a high school student actually approached him afterward, thanking him for being the only one telling the truth on stage. He openly credits his wife Heidi for keeping him connected to his faith, and he describes his campaign as a divine pressure on his heart. He basically told his audience that he prayed asking God that if he is meant to save the animals, save the humans, and protect the city, to just keep putting him in a position to do so. If not, he says he'll happily go home and help his wife with their kids. So he really views his political surge not as personal ambition, but as God's plan unfolding.
So, what should you take away from all this? We've got a massive clash between a heavily funded political establishment and a populist outsider armed with explosive rhetoric and a promise of radical transparency. It leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative thought. Will a reality TV approach to radical transparency be the key to solving Los Angeles' most complex and deeply entrenched crises? We'll be watching the data closely as this fascinating political story continues to unfold. Thanks for joining me on this explainer.